Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Lee. I'm the founder of the Hollywood Sound Museum, and I'm so thrilled you're here for the very first webinar. It is being recorded for posterity, for our archives, and for everyone to enjoy. So thank you for being here, and on with the show. Hey, we are here. This is our very first webinar for the Hollywood Sound Museum. Thank you so much for attending. We're going to talk about nothing for a few minutes so we get a couple more attendees, but I will start to introduce the group. We have Charles Maynes, Sound Effects Recordist extraordinaire and sound designer, and my old pal Eric Potter, whom I worked with for many years.
Ahoy!
Many years.
Happy to be aboard this maiden voyage.
Thank you. And Eric, let me again compliment you on the amazing background that you are.
Yeah, I just had I found that picture on the internet. Somebody's really cool studio.
He's lying. He's lying.
Yeah.
He has all that crap.
Yeah, I mean, I could actually.
Yeah, pull something out of the background, and then we'll CG it in later. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us all on the inaugural Hollywood Sound Museum webinar. We hope to have this as a series, ongoing series. We have Mark Mangini scheduled on the 20th coming up, so that'll be really fun.
Hey.
Yeah, so it's exciting, but I appreciate you guys are here to talk about sound effects recording, which is really the first step of the process. I mean, once a sound supervisor gets the film and starts spotting and starts realizing the sounds that they need, they call you guys.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, really.
If they don't already have everything they need, which sometimes happens.
Well, you and I, Eric, will have a webinar about sound libraries, and we will talk about that in the near future. But for right now, let's talk about how you guys got into this crazy job. And oh, by the way, I poured myself a cocktail. Everybody else, please. We're luscious here, so please open up one. It's cocktail hour.
There you go.
Somewhere.
I'm normally a cocktail man myself, but I don't have a bar in my studio.
That's good enough, pal.
That might seem. So I'm going with a cold, tall brew.
I love it. So Charles, how did you get into this madness?
Music. I mean, actually, Eric and I are both musicians, even now, or at least we try to be. So yeah, I mean, basically getting into audio in general was through music. You know, it's like being in bands and then getting a degree in sound recording in community college and TV production and journalism kind of led me into, you know, trying to get into studios and stuff. And, you know, that's really how I got my entrance.
And what was your first job? I see on IMDb, by the way, and I'm going to put up everybody's IMDb in the chat room, so anyone attending can look at our credits, and if you want to text us in the chat room a question about one of those films, please do. But Chuck, I see one of the first credits you have is it true that you worked on Return of the Killer Tomatoes?
It is. It is. Absolutely. And I'm very proud of that, actually.
Tell us, please.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in that. One is that basically I had no experience doing film sound at all. And it was with a friend of mine, you know, who I met in that process, who's now, you know, also working in Hollywood, a guy who's named Martin Lopez, does amazing work and is as clever as, you know, Ken Johnson or anything else in developing crazy contraptions to make sound.
A contemporary Jimmy McDonald, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he was working at Sound Deluxe when they did the Godzilla thing, and he actually made a huge bellows thing for its breaths, you know. And they did this insane thing where they, I guess, got permission to record through a giant PA on a super early Sunday morning in Hollywood.
Oh wow!
Footsteps going, you know, bouncing off the buildings. You know, which was just crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, it basically worked on it with him. I was working with digital samplers, like way back in the 80s. So Martin came to me and said, hey, I've got this crazy thing. I think I want to use digital samplers for it. Can you make me some noises? And we basically made noises for it, you know, which was really daunting because, you know, it's like, you know, we'd come up with stuff, Martin would come over, take it and transfer it to a Nagra. and then essentially transfer that to 16 millimeter single stripe and cut it into, his show. I think I got like $500 for working on the thing. And the ultimate payoff was I got to meet John Astin.
Oh, wow.
Because he was like one of the people in it. But as it turned out, there was another guy who like was a loser actor who it was his second film, and his name was George Clooney.
Oh, that's right. I did hear about that. Yeah.
Which was really nuts. I mean, and I'm just saying that jokingly, obviously. But it was just kind of funny how, it all worked out. It was made by a little company in San Diego, where the guy who was the director was actually, I think, a state senator, for, one of the districts in San Diego. And he had this like little film company, and they did they did Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and I want to say like 5 or 6 sequels. But that was the second one, and it was good fun. It was really, really entertaining.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And did that lead to the next thing, or
not at all? Not at all.
And how did that? Yeah, moving on from there.
Yeah, basically, I mean, I was still working in the music industry, and working for companies, or I was working for a shop down in San Diego that was kind of like Westlake Pro. And I was kind of one of the people who was specializing in the digital sampling stuff.
Okay.
So I ended up making contacts in the industry, got to do work for instruments and stuff. Ended up in the Bay Area, working for a company that was really close to EMU Systems, which made the emulators. And then when I was there, I basically was invited by a friend of mine to come work at Digidesign right as they were starting the development on Pro Tools 1.
Wow.
So I got into that, still had no aspirations for post, for anything having to do with film sound. Ended up working there, ended up getting into essentially supporting film sound and getting into product testing. And then that's how I started meeting people who, ultimately were able to bring me down to LA to get into the business.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
that's
cool.
Awesome. That's very cool. And then, I mean, a little later, you met, you got to work with Steve Flick when he was forming his new company. We'll get into that too later.
Right.
But yeah, which Eric and I started in on.
Oh yeah, you guys had the epic start.
Yeah, Eric. Now you knew Joe Dante, the director, and he made an introduction for you. How did that work?
Unlike Charles, I wasn't originally a musician in terms of doing sound work. I hadn't really been playing in bands or anything yet, but I had been interested in sound and recording since I was really quite young. Mm-hmm. And my dad worked in an office, and they had the dictaphone machines, and they were portable voice recorders. It would record on a magnetic band, like maybe 3 inches wide.
Wow.
And a very curious medium, and strictly intended for voice transcription, of dictating a letter or something. But I was fascinated by this dictaphone recorder that he would use. He would come home at night and do his homework for work, dictating things that were going to be typed out the next day. He's on the sofa in my living room, our living room. I'm trying to watch TV or something. He's like, "Can you turn that down? I got to do my thing." And he's reading, and I asked him about the dictaphone, and I became fascinated with essentially location recording or field recording, and I started recording the television. I recorded our dog. I recorded anything I could find, and had no idea that would be useful to anyone, just entertaining myself. And eventually also, God bless my dad. He's ended up providing so much for me unintentionally. He would go golfing, and the guy who ran the public golf course was this Joe Dante's father, Jimmy Dante.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
I would go there and occasionally work as a golf caddy as a young when I was maybe 13 or something. And eventually Jimmy Dante was curious. He's like, Eric, you're a good kid. You're not going to be a golf caddy all your life, I hope. What are you interested in doing with for a career or whatever? And I did say I was into radio, music, sound, and I thought maybe I even said like sound, maybe sound for movies or just working on movies could be fun. And he was like, movies. My son Joe moved to Los Angeles, and he's made this film Piranha. And it's making a big splash in Hollywood, And
no pun intended,
really.
of course.
Yeah, well, that pun was intended. I'm glad.
But yeah, but that was Roger Corman, who so many people got their start with Roger.
Yeah. So I was I started to get connected to that world in a very remote way in my youth, and then eventually I followed a friend to Hollywood, a friend who was a filmmaker. And I thought, wow, man, maybe we can find some stuff to do. And when I got here, I think Inner Space had debuted at the Chinese theater.
Yeah.
And so we went to see Inner Space because I thought Martin Short was a laugh riot, and I loved SCTV and all of that. And right on the marquee of the Chinese theater, it says Inner Space, a Joe Dante film.
Wow.
And I actually recognized it. Many years had passed. I was like, wait, Joe Dante, I think I know his dad. Yeah,
I've got a connection to that guy.
Yeah,
wow.
And sure enough, Joe, I called my dad, and he called Jimmy Dante, and Jimmy had retired. So he had all day to talk on the phone. And he's like, oh, you got to go see Joe. You got to go see Joe. And it was Joe. Joe was great. He went to, you've probably been to his office. He had at Warner Brothers back then.
Yeah. And his,
with all the toys.
His one after that at Paramount too. When Gremlins had come out, he had moved to Paramount. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, suddenly I was on a big studio lot visiting with a known director with a really fun office. And, he told me, I can't just hire you. You got to be in the union, but you got to go see these people who do the real sound work. He told me how he knew Mark Mangini and Thunder Tracks, Stephen Flick, Richard Anderson, and so that's how I met Mark Mangini was through Joe. And as soon as I walked in the place, I got that feeling, you get like, these are my people, this is everyone is just fascinated with little sounds, big sounds, little sounds. And it's so, to speak to our little corner of film sound, you can't expect to show up and get involved on a big movie and just feel welcome or something. It can be very competitive, but in our little corner, everybody made me feel so welcome and comfortable in that shop.
It really was a family.
Yeah, and it was I went back then. There weren't interns. They didn't really have interns. You might have an apprentice editor who would come through the Editors Guild. But I wasn't even interested in editing. I was really still focused on recording and maybe working with tape a little bit, but I wasn't so much a cutter and splicer or anything. Yeah. But yeah, that inclination and following that just sort of brought me really to probably the best possible place you could set foot.
It was the best time. It really was. I started just shortly after you, around that same time. 88, 89, around in there.
But thankfully, it was a boom time, where in the 90s, they were making a lot of movies and sound was becoming a big deal. Theaters were getting good sound systems, playback systems. So now you could really, directors and producers were interested in developing, sophisticated soundtracks.
Absolutely. Yeah. The revolution had really started like in the mid 70s, but just in that time, everybody was getting comfortable with it. And with Dolby and digital and all that, you could put so much more detail into the soundtracks. And, they needed, guys like you to go out and start recording fresh things for all that detail. But Eric, you were in the library with me for a while. And then I think I kind of sort of took over the library and you started doing more field recording and that sort of thing. How did that, I think Edward Scissorhands was the first one you did?
Maybe Edward Scissorhands. Well, the very first film that I recorded for was actually Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, that's right. Richard Anderson did the restoration of Lawrence of Arabia.
Wow. That's right. And it was kind of a fluke. I was literally, I guess it was just before you got there.
Yeah.
And I was just starting out. And I was having so much fun in the library, I would stay late. Like, why
we
go
all
home?
did.
Yeah. I had this cruddy, hot apartment. And here I am in this air-conditioned sound library with thousands of reels of tape.
We were always listening to stuff. We always had something going in our office. Yeah. Well, this is a webinar to have later, but the library was a magical place.
As a result, because I was there late, and Richard Anderson, one of the partners, and who was the supervising sound editor for the restoration of Lawrence of Arabia, he called in, hoping somebody was in the shop, and I picked up the phone, and we hadn't even met yet. I'd been there for like 2 weeks. And he was on the mix stage with David Lean that whole time.
Right.
And, this is Eric. And he knew, you're the new guy. I'm like, yeah. You know how to work a Nagra? And I was like, sure. Actually, I did.
Why not?
Yeah, I had done some production work just before that in Boston. And I was like, yeah, actually, I can run a Nagra. And so they needed to add some new sound from deleted scenes, and they didn't have the original sound. It's that classic sound of the lieutenant, the obsessive lieutenant, and he's always sort of stomping his boot and saluting, every time. So there was a scene in a hallway where he did that, and this was a restored scene that they put back in, and they didn't have the production sound of the stomping boot, and so I got some boots. And Richard Anderson had the brilliant idea of going over to Goldwyn Sound, which would become, the West Hollywood studio facility. Because
the Hollywood Sound Museum actually has an office there right now.
That's exactly, that's where you're based now with the office.
Yeah.
So those editing hallways, they're probably still like that, just like a hard linoleum kind of floor, a hard floor with an echoey hallway. And that's exactly was the setting of this shot with the lieutenant saluting and stomping his boot. And so my first sound effect was actually, thanks to Richard Anderson, it was actually very sophisticated. It exploited the ambience of the hall. It wasn't just a dry Foley style smack. And so I learned right away the importance of that,
putting a little bit of room on something. I actually want to talk to Charles a bit about that too, because you wrote that wonderful piece in one of those magazines about worldizing, which is something I want to talk about also. Sure. But, there's so many different disciplines in sound effects recording. There's like getting it dry and neat and let the mixer do whatever they want to it. Or there's, knowing exactly what it's going for and getting enough room on it. And especially like something like door closes where you know exactly what environment it's in and hearing it from down the hall or something like that. It's really, it gives it this indigenousness that you really can't fake. So, but Charles, I'm ignoring Charles, so I want to get you into this too. But yeah, it's you've done a lot of that sort of, been very aware of the space and the and could you talk a bit about that and worldizing also, what that is for our audience?
Sure. For the worldizing thing, that was an article I wrote for the Editors Guild magazine years ago. And Eric, I think I might have even talked to you about that. I know I had spoken with Richard, and he, I think in his case, I had heard about some stuff he had done for Gattaca for like some siren sounds where you guys went out. Eric, I think that you were involved in that particular thing. I know with the.
That's true. Yes.
What was the? Oh God!
It was well in Gattaca. They had electric cars.
Right.
And
right.
And so, but they used to give it a strange vintage retro future feel. I think they used Buick Rivieras from the 60s, and they had this modern look, but of course they're gas engine cars.
Sure.
And so we recorded a lot of electric motors. We recorded this was back when electric cars were not at all in production, but there were some independent shops doing it, and we got a converted Fiero and we recorded it. And then we didn't quite like the sound of that, so we recorded a lot of motors that we liked, and one of them was actually, I can show you, I think.
He's moving
on here.
He's gone rogue.
This tape recorder.
I remember that.
It's a Technics.
Yeah, vintage 2-track.
That was at the shop for a while, wasn't it? Recorder.
And let me flip back to. So that has a nice sounding motor on it.
Yeah.
But it sounded dry. We recorded it in the studio. It's totally dead. And that's where the worldizing came in. Richard liked the sound of that motor, but we wanted it to sound like it was driving by and moving, like just a car, So that's probably what you're remembering, that aspect where we put speaker up on Richard King's Jeep and drove around in this kind of rocky canyon environment to get reflections and spaciousness. So that's probably what you're thinking of it.
Well, yeah, I remember Richard certainly mentioning that, when I interviewed him for the article. And, it was, I think it all started out after reading Walter Murch's, he did a presentation regarding the sound post-production for A Touch of Evil.
Oh, wow.
There were very, very specific sound notes that Wells had, and how, basically, I think that was the first instance of worldizing being used, where they took a recording of the sound and then played it back in an acoustic environment to get a very specific acoustic sound.
Well, I think Walter had been doing that a bit earlier also on like THX 1138 and some of the other films.
Right. Well, I mean, the big one was American Graffiti.
Oh, yes, of course. All the radio, all the music for the film. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was always a really interesting thing. And I know, when I came into the industry, which was in '94 when I moved here, I mean, when you hit the industry, as you guys know, it's like, all of a sudden you have people like Warren Hamilton and, Marvin and, Steve and Mark and Richard, who are like dumping this tidal wave of historic information.
Yeah. Fountain of knowledge. Yeah. All those guys are legends. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible. Well, it's like, going back to even the Treg Brown stuff, where it's like, you listen to those effects and like, obviously most of them were recorded on sound stages because you can hear the acoustics.
Sure.
And you go, okay, well, they didn't have sophisticated reverb available back then, and they had to make the sound happen before the microphone. And I think that, that was one of the things that was really interesting, and, kind of, just moving along where you learn that the acoustic space that you record an effect in ends up being pretty important. You can do Foley stage style recording where it's, very immediate and very close up. But a lot of times, I mean, I think, actually, if you look at, even Foley done here versus on the East Coast and in Europe, our Foley is significantly more anechoic sounding than, say, Foley that comes out of C5 or, out of Twickenham or anything else. And even with that, I know Mark, I think, was responsible for you guys doing that on-set Foley with John Resch for Green Mile.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
pretty remarkable. They
You know,
did.
and-
They kept the sets up from demolition for
Right.
several weeks for John Rush to walk the Foley on the actual sets of the Green Mile. So it sounded
Right.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, even, I mean, I'm working on SEAL Team, and well, I don't know how it's going to be for this season, but up until now, since I've done 3 seasons with them, you know, I have access to literally every single set and location that we shoot at. So it's like, you know, if I need to like do, you know, the military base thing or the C-17 set, which is actually a real sounding C-17 interior.
Wow.
I just go and bring a recorder and set up mics and do whatever I need to do and then go and cut it in. And it's like, okay, that would have taken me forever to get the right sound out of the library. And chances are the Foley team wouldn't have had access to the surfaces or the time to really monkey with it. And, you know, it's just like, yeah, this is really cool. And, you know, even with effects, you know, you have that same thing where, you know, it's like, if you can, you know, record something, especially like a gun or an explosion in a space that, you know, makes it sound like a movie sound effect, you know, that's a huge boon. You know, I mean, I know, you know, Gary Rydstrom is really a big fan of, you know, those kind of, you know, acoustic sounding or, you know, like really natural sounding recordings versus it, you know, being something you kind of put together in the editorial phase so much.
Yeah, and it's still very dry and very manufactured kind of.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I mean, I think that there is, you know, a real authenticity, and I know Eric has, you know, done a huge amount of great work. I mean, I remember when, you know, Eric and Ken went out for Twister.
Oh,
know,
wow. What was
you guys
that
were
thing
out
that,
for
yeah,
weeks.
didn't you build a prop or something to, Ken built
Oh,
something? Or am I thinking of something else? Thinking of
So
another
for
show.
yeah, some of the wind elements, we had been playing with objects, you know, that would resonate in the wind. And so we'd go out to the desert and try to, on a windy day or maybe up in the San Gabriel Mountains, and, you know, chicken wire. I found a birdhouse that was quite mostly solid wood, but had ported holes in it for birds to go in and out of. And I just put that thing up in the wind, and it just started, you know, making tones.
Right.
But it was never quite that exciting. It was, you know, we were just like, man, but this has to be like a fucking tornado, you know.
Right.
And it was Ken who had the brilliant idea of, let's hook everything up to a vehicle and drive into the wind.
Right.
And, you know, and we'll do whatever we can to try to overcome the engine sound and the tires. And that was some difficulty. And that, I think that was the first time. I think it was really Ken's idea to like rig this stuff up and create your own winds by driving. And it worked out pretty well. And then, so I've been doing that several times onward. The ship in Master and Commander, the Far Side of the World, you know, that they go into a storm. And so thanks to Ken Johnson, I mentioned it to Richard Anderson, or Richard King, the supervisor on that one. He's like, yo, yeah, let's do it. And John Fasal and I built an even bigger truck sail rig, you know. And yeah, so yeah, drive. And so we found a windy day where it was already getting up to like 40 mile an hour gusts, and drive into it at 60 miles an hour, and voila, you have a 100 mile an hour wind.
Right.
Ripping through the various objects that you've rigged up into the sky, you know, up above the cab. Yeah. But that was Ken's idea.
That's brilliant. Well, Ken is a genius for that sort of thing. He's just an evil genius mastermind for sound effects props and
Ken
ideas.
Johnson blows his room up.
Yeah, that's an effect. Very early in my tenure at Weddington, I saw that, and what the hell? And I got the story from you, Eric. No, he literally filled his room with some gas that he ignited or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, I don't remember. Do you remember more, Eric?
I don't know that I don't know the real story.
Yeah. Well, it was something like that. It was something stupidly.
Let's ask Mark in a couple of weeks. We can ask Mark.
Yeah, when Mark Mangini is
here.
We'll
find, we got to track down Ken.
Yeah, I gotta give him a call. I haven't talked to him in a long time.
Yeah,
but
he's appeared on some of our on Interstellar. He came in and really did some of that same creative, make a prop that makes sound and build something. Hey, kitty.
I was gonna say I love the cat.
We got 3 new cats. All our old animals passed away. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Today's the anniversary of one of my cats passing too. So
I saw that. That was very sad.
Yeah, he was a good boy. But anyway, Chuck, talking about worldizing and recording and all this inventiveness, one of my favorite films that you worked on, Mystery Men.
Oh, geez.
I know.
That was quite an adventure. That was
Steve Flick. Fun. But you did this wonderful thing. It's, synth effects are always really tricky because they're always very dry, coming, right line in from a synthesizer. But you had this ingenious idea sort of involving worldizing to make them more of the real world. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, no, that was actually a really cool one. And it was one where, we didn't know which direction to take. And it's like, one of my biggest influences was the Treg Brown whole
he's
Warner
a genius.
Brothers experience. Yeah,
it's like genius.
He defined my childhood. It was crazy. So it's like, I didn't know what it was when I was younger. Actually, I don't think I found out what it was until I was here.
Yeah.
But it was like I thought, an inertia starter type effect, would be really a great place to
start for that. Yeah.
Try to go for.
Really quickly for our audience, Treg Brown was the genius at Warner Brothers who made all those crazy cartoon sounds. But he was, unlike Jimmy McDonald at Disney, who would make a prop for a sound effect, Treg would find a recording of a real thing in the real world and juxtapose it into the cartoon world. Right. And an inertia starter is like one of those motors that, takes a while to ramp up and it excels. And then they start an engine for whatever it is, a plane or whatever it is. But it's that ramping up sound. And he found a way to extend it by cutting it into itself over and over, so it's always accelerating. Right. And that's like the Tasmanian Devil. That's what he was.
Yeah, anyway. The Tasmanian Devil was exactly the effect that I thought would be, kind of a good starting point. So, I was using samplers back then, and I was able to kind of generate a sound that had that quality. It didn't have the ramp built into it, but I knew that, I can manipulate the pitch independently and, by will with the pitch bend wheel or whatever on the keyboard. And I thought, okay, well, that's all good, but it's going to sound totally fake. So, it's like, that's not going to work because of the universe of that film. It's got this weird retro vibe to it. So what I did was basically brought into my room a trim bin, and then just started putting a bunch of junk in it.
A trim bin, for all of you who don't know, it's an artifact from the old editing days. It's a big metal bin that they used to have a rod over it with hooks so that you could have film clips for editors. If you were editing, you had a section of film, you put it in the clip and it's collected in this big metal trim bin.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. And they're really kind of almost a little flimsy, so they're very resonant, and
they were so cheap.
They're hollow.
Yeah, they're hollow. So cheap. Yeah, it's like, all of the Christie's stuff was, it seemed like, they should have just coated everything with Bakelite, because it was like, oh yeah, we need to make this all look like it came from 1946.
Yeah.
And so, basically I got that. I put a bunch of split reels and whatever other metal junk I could find, even plastic stuff.
To reverberate in the thing, yeah.
Well, to vibrate.
Yeah,
basically, the whole idea was, to put a bunch of crap in the bin and then put a speaker on top of it, and then push the synthesizer sound through the speaker and then record the bin. And it did exactly what I was anticipating it would. It's like you'd be recording the thing, and you do pitch changes and the different resonant frequencies inside with all the crap inside would.
So you can control the frequencies of the sound while you were recording this thing.
Right.
That's great.
And it was really cool, and it's like, gave this, really organic sound. You could actually go pretty sci-fi And, you know, since you were adding this acoustic element to it, it actually sounded like it could be a real sound. We did something really similar on this horrible film that Chuck Russell did called Bless the Child, where we had, you know, like this scene where they were in, you know, like a church with these votive candles, and it was supernatural, and, you know, all the candles needed to shake. And I was like, okay, well, how are we going to get that sound? You know, because that's pretty specific. And, you know, it's like you really need it to be something that you can have as a long arc, as opposed to like, you know, oh, we're bumping the table to get these things to shake against one another. So, you know, I did this thing where I took a subwoofer, put a big big sheet of glass on top of it, bunch of glasses, and then fed in a sine wave tone with, you know, my synthesizer, and I could essentially vary the pitch of the tone to get, you know, everything shaking like it needed to be done.
That's very cool.
And it was just neat. You know, it's like, you know, using the kind of acoustic coupling, you know, I think it's almost impossible to make a believable sound electronically. I mean, I think you really have
It's getting better, but yeah, for the most part, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, it there's just something that when you hear an acoustic sound, like, you know, like Eric might record, or, you know, I might do out in the field, you know, you never doubt that it's not real.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it might not be great, but you never doubt that it's fake.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big deal. You know, I mean, I think that, you know, that tends to work better than Foley.
I think Eric Potter is just making sound so that the camera will cut to him. That's what I'm thinking.
That's actually, that's the sound of a brownout in our neighborhood here. All of my electronics just ducked out for only 2 seconds, and now we're back.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. But you heard it, huh?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I notice it keeps cutting to you every time you move something around or something. We'll have to talk to you now, Eric, to get you on camera more. But anyway,
Chuck,
pressing this little call button here, you know, maybe that's it.
But Chuck, yeah, you were.
Oh, no, like I said, it was just, I think that, you know, when you have, you know, something that sounds like it's happening in real life, it pretty much sells itself as happening in real life, you know?
Sure.
I mean, Richard, I know, has always been all about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he's very acoustically oriented. And I think it really, you know, I mean, the quality of the work that goes into his films really reflects, you know, that aesthetic. You know,
yeah, Richard King really became one of the A-listers of sound very quickly, because his stuff is just always brilliant. And he won the Oscar for Master and Commander, which is just a brilliant job. It's absolutely fantastic. And Eric records a lot of his stuff, which is very cool.
Does. Yeah. Yes, he does.
And let's talk to you, Eric, for a bit more. One of the shows that I was really impressed that you'd done or worked on, and I'm sure there were other recordists. I think Fasal was on it too. And the Oscar winner for the year was Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah, that was a brilliant job. And that's a really interesting case where you have multiple different cars that each have to have their own character and that sort of thing. And those present so many different challenges. Could you talk a bit about your work on that one?
Yeah, I was. That was very much John Fasal's doing. I think he got the bulk of the material they needed. They did quite a bit of traveling, and it was quite a lot of effort to locate something for the Ford GT, because they're just not around, you know, and especially here in the U.S. And so Don Sylvester and Jay Wilkinson had done a lot of work on that film, cutting and designing the automotive stuff. And he would go out with John to record, you know, where they could find. So I don't know a lot of the specifics of all the cars, except when there was, when it came to the main challenger Ferrari, I got involved at that point. Don had heard, Don once lived in Atlanta area, and he had gone back to visit, and might have been during Thanksgiving or something during a holiday. And somehow he came across a Ferrari owner there near Atlanta. I think he may have actually seen the car drive by, and it was one of these very rare 12-cylinder, late 50s, early 60s Ferrari, and he just loved the sound of it. And then he tracked down, he managed to get a hold of the owner, and they talked, and it turned out that it actually was a fairly good representation of the engines that they would be using at Le Mans in the 60s. And the same V12 engine type and pretty darn close. So the body of the car was actually a 1959 Testarossa. And so that was all nice and kosher in terms of being fairly representative, but Don just loved the sound of the car, which was the wonderful thing. And so thankfully that recording all came down to the beauty and wonder of that fellow. Steve Bush was the owner and the driver of that car. And he was just enthusiastic. And beyond that, he was just a wonderful, conscientious, hard-working and warm person. And he went well out of his way to find a track in a quiet place. We ended up going down quite a ways to Florida. He trailered the car down to Florida, and he auditioned this track before we even showed up. He went down, he listened, he made sure it was quiet enough in the background. He made sure there was enough straight stretches to get some long pulls of the engine accelerating and decelerating.
It's really nice when you have someone who knows what you need.
Yeah, and
to look for that stuff.
Yeah, he's not a sound guy. He's not a production person. He's definitely a car guy. But he really got it, and he did all this legwork so that when we showed up, we flew out from LA. I had been all over. I was a lot of real frequent flyer at that time. And so I couldn't always get to all the Ford versus Ferrari recording sessions. I was in Africa recording for National Geographic in the remote wilderness. So Charlie Campagna came in to help out on some of those recordings when I wasn't here. And so Charlie got a lot of they went up to the Monterey, the beautiful racetrack up there, Laguna Seca, and where they had vintage car races. And so Charlie was able to just like get all these great pass-bys and such of these real 1960s race cars, a lot of them European and a lot of them very much like what you would want to have at Le Mans 66. But thankfully I got in for that Ferrari recording, and it just a beautiful car, a wonderful driver, and everything came together very nicely. We spent an entire day just rigging the car because I don't know, it's probably a $3 million car or something.
Wow.
It's the only one there is that, or the only one that we found, that was workable and wonderful. So, but we spent, because the paint was so perfect, everything was so exquisite on that car, we budgeted an entire day just to mount microphones and not even come close to scratching a paint or I mean, we never caused trouble on even the cheapest of cars unless we state that as the goal up front. And Steve Lee, you could probably remember some
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of that,
Eric Potter, when we were working together, there were some rental organizations that would not rent Eric.
That's not true. People were fond of saying that, but I've never been banned from any automotive rental agency.
Well, I came close a few times, I think.
Back then we had Rent-A-Wreck, And
That's right.
Right.
Over there on Pico. Yeah.
you would go to Rent-A-Wreck, and they, it's a wreck. And
But then we would do more. We would like pull spark plugs and do all these different things. And, sometimes, some people would want to drill holes in the muffler and things like that.
Probably the granddaddy you remember well is the, and what movie was it?
I know what you're going to say. The Valiant Valiant.
Yes. The Valiant.
Yeah, the Valiant.
Something happens, like they drive over the parking spikes.
That was Edward Scissorhands. That was Edward
Huh?
Scissorhands. I remember that one.
Oh, that in Scissorhands?
Or no. Rebars. We set up a bunch of rebars that you drove over for Edward Scissorhands. You're thinking of something else.
The scene I'm thinking of, I wish I could remember the film, is they end up with 2 flat tires completely shredded to where the tires are gone. They're off the rim. And that was kind of the visual gag, was they're driving on bare rims. And, that just was not in it wasn't in our library. Richard Anderson may have called around. You got anything on? Nobody had anything, car driving on bare rims. So we rented the Rent-A-Wreck, but I took good measures. I went to the used tire and wheel place. I bought 2 steel rims, and we went out to the desert, and with 2 jacks, we jacked the car up and removed the tire and wheel and put the bare rims on, and drove it on an old crumbly street that nobody cared about. So you take some
precautions,
some measures, so that
what was
we put the car back together and bring it back, and everything's fine.
Our transfer guy Dave Moreno. Do you remember the car that he had? The cop car?
Yeah, he had the Dodge Diplomat, the '90s Dodge Diplomat, which was a common police vehicle.
Well, I remember a story. I don't know if it was you or Ezra Dweck, the other recordist there at the time that was also in the library. But there was some pickup. Yeah, there was some pickup you needed, some extra sound effect you needed from like a cop car, some specific maneuver, and it was like a really intense maneuver. And one of you guys, either you or Ezra, just went to Dave when he was just a little too busy to realize what was going on. Hey, Dave, can I borrow the keys to your car?
Oh, because the Weddington parking lot was notoriously overstuffed.
Yeah.
And we were always moving each other's cars.
That's right.
I'm in the middle of a cut. You move my car.
So
sure,
you guys take David's keys and you go out and record this ridiculous maneuver. And then you hand the tape. You have to hand the tape back to Dave because he's our transfer guy. So he hears this car maneuver, and after a few seconds, he's, wait a second.
Oh, geez. That's great.
That's my car. that did happen. It
did happen. It absolutely
That's awesome.
I was afraid you were going to tell something much more.
No. I've learned my lesson.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I was going to say that the Warren's Pinto running on 3 cylinders.
Oh, right.
Was always quite an epic one as well.
Yeah.
Everybody had a very distinctive car. We were always borrowing each other's car. I think Mary Andrews had that VW Bug that you had for a while, Eric. I think one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We were all borrowing each other's cars if there was a moment where we needed. That's how it was at Weddington. Everybody was
the blimp.
Oh, the blimp. Larry Blake's blimp. That fan belt squeal is I'm still hearing.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's a wonderful moment in Explorers, the Joe Dante film that Mark Mangini did, where this robot spider creaks to a stop, and Mark thought to put in the blimp fan belt squeal, and it's just
nice.
Genius, just genius stuff. Yeah. But anyway, Chuck, I wanted to talk to you. We've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to ask you a few things. I saw on your resume, and we'd never talked about this. You worked on A Knight's Tale, which I think is those period films, especially those medieval kind of situations, are fascinating to try to gather sounds in a contemporary world, trying to find the elements you need. Could you talk a bit about the challenges on that one?
Well, for Knight's Tale, it was filmed. Brian Hoagland was the director. John Johnson was the sound supervisor on it. We had an outstanding crew. Miguel Rivera did Foley. We had Brian Jennings, who was kind of started out as John's assistant. Keith Bilderbeck worked on it. The one thing that was kind of interesting on that was, as you go through your career, you always like have these landmarks of like, okay, I'm never ever going to volunteer for this again. Which just seems like, especially as you're kind of, in editorial, I think it's the worst. As sound recordists, we actually kind of get off easy in a lot of ways. But when you're doing editorial, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to try to take the thing that's like the most challenging part of the thing, but part of the show, and do that. Like for me, it's like I had two really specific things. One was, as my first movie really doing weapons, I volunteered to do that for Starship Troopers, which was really quite an insane thing to volunteer for. And for Night's Tale, oh yeah. Oh well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we're talking more about recording and stuff and not editorial. But I look at that movie and remember that we were using videotape cutting that, which means that essentially we were having to roll tape back and forth to catch sync to verify edits on everything. And there were so many sounds on that Twister was the same way, where it's like, we didn't have digital picture. We didn't just have the picture always in sync. It's like there's never a wait time. It's like we never have to screw with the video deck.
Right.
Back then it was, it wasn't like that. It's like you did have to worry about sync. It's like
back in the old days.
Yeah, I mean
the ancient days of videotape.
It was crazy, and I could see even the people coming off a mag, with a Moviola, or a Chem, it's like you've got absolute sync. It's like everything is running together. Mm-hmm. So your sync is always good. When you add videotape in, it's sort of like, oh yeah, we're going to make everything tricky now, because nothing's going to repeat itself. So at any rate, I did the horses on Knight's Tale. We knew that they were all super dramatic. It's like it was all, like Panzer tank horses.
Did you shoot raw stuff or like the jousting or specific things that? We
did. Well, we did. It was we did it on the cheap, if you will, in the sense that we didn't even think about trying to do like real jousting. Mm-hmm. We just like, okay, there's a lot of wood blowing up, so we need to like make a lot of wood blowing up sounds. So I think John Johnson actually really led the charge on that, if you pardon the pun.
No, we're full of those today.
Yeah, lots of fun. So he did this amazing collection of breaking plywood and stuff that we ended up, and he would dump that into the Synclav, and then kind of bigify it there. I did the horses, so it's like I started out with all the horse libraries. We had the stuff that we used in All the Pretty Horses because it was a Sony show, so it was a part of the Sony library. Even though Steven did it with I think Patricio recorded most of those horses. But then I went out and recorded onboard horses down in San Diego. My mom had a friend who had horses out in East County. So I got some good stuff from that. And then, for a lot of it, it was like super slow-mo type stuff. Whereas, the big, hyper stylized things. And I remember going out and trying to, like record, I think I went up to one of the parks here in Burbank in the middle of the night when they were watering the grass at like a baseball field, and took like a 10-pound sledgehammer and was like pounding the soil for footfalls. And so, it's like, that was like for some of the jousting where we needed these big, beefy dirt kind of, things. But then at the same time, we had a scene where there was a horse that actually walked inside of a medieval cathedral, in one of the gags with Heath Ledger.
I remember, yeah.
And I did exactly what you would think. I went to the store and bought some coconuts. And I recorded coconuts on my garage floor.
It still works.
It works better than anybody would like it to.
Yeah.
There's that sure work in the Holy Grail, right?
Oh, totally. Well, no. Well, I was actually I wasn't doing them, clopping together. I was doing them actually on concrete.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So it worked. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really surprising.
Jimmy McDonald at Disney always had that peeve where he would insist on the four-legged horses. Do you know that whole story?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Bum, 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 bum.
Huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always wondered in the Monty Python and the Holy Grail when they have his trustful servant Patsy is clomping the coconuts right behind them. They're on their pretend horse, as if maybe that's a little nod to the Foley people or the sound editors, and like, yeah, this is how it's done. We'll show you.
Yeah. Terry Gilliam was very conscious of sound effects on the old TV show and others. He made a lot of those vocally himself, so he was always aware of those gags. So I have no doubt that was a little reference, a little tribute. Yeah.
Well, they were always poking fun at the process,
Sure.
which is what made it so charming,
Yeah.
But yeah, so Charles, I just wonder if without giving away any trade secrets, it's really hard to record on board horses, isn't it? I mean, and have you found anything? I finally arrived at something, but I haven't gotten to do it all that much. But do you have any, without giving away the store, but like, how do you do it?
Well, I really like using lavs. I mean, the one lav that for some reason, I don't know that many people use it, but I love it, is the Sennheiser MKE2s.
Sure, yeah. Good sounding lav.
Yeah, they're
so you actually mount them on the horse, these lavaliers, like lavs are those little mics that you see like on TV shows when people are being interviewed, those little microphones. So you actually mount those onto the horse's rig for recording it?
Right, yeah, what I'll do is I'll usually put, one up by the bridle, so you can get the horse breathing and, making its mouth noises. And then I like to put one underneath, where the strap is for the saddle to get some of the feet sounds. And then usually I'll try to, put one at least on the rider, and then I'll put, the recorder in a backpack on the rider.
Oh, wow.
Like a soft bag. And then just let them go and do their thing, and then, if you can get them in a ring, you can have them essentially do circles around you. So you can boom the circle so you get, like the constant sound without
a rider on the horse. You're saying?
Well, no, you would have the rider on the horse.
You would have the horse. Oh, okay.
They would just run around at whatever speed you needed, and it has worked pretty good for me.
That's very cool.
You can find a ring where the soil isn't too soft. Right? Sometimes it's very sandy in a ring, but I do love that circling and tracking, version as well as the rigged up onboard. Right? I think that's a great way to go.
Right.
And then minimizing the sound of the saddle and all the straps and everything, that gets quite distracting sometimes. Have you ended up taping them up or silencing them in some way, or? Yeah,
usually, I mean, using some gaffer's tape or something on the buckles, helps. I mean, you do have some noises that you have to make, or you have to adjust for.
It feels natural, and that's not too bad, but some of the metallic stuff really drives me nuts sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest trick is, really, not. I think if you have directional mics, which I mean my MKE2s are cardioids, you can do a lot with that.
Yeah.
But then it's like you do lean on the boom a lot. I mean it's like I really like the 416s for that, or even even an 816 or an 8070. The problem with a long shotgun is you end up with phase issues because it's so directional. So, I mean, I think the short shotguns tend to work a little better, but, it's weird with those even, since we're, kind of now going into more, technical minutia. The 416, I think is still, just a lovely, lovely sounding mic. All of the other short shotguns that I've used, the Sankins, the Sheps, the new Sennheisers, like the MKH60 and the, I think it's the 7060, which is their new series. They don't have as tight of a pickup pattern, so it's like they tend to be they're almost more of a hypercardioid pattern as opposed to a shotgun.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the 416 to me still is really the sound of classic Hollywood, like 70s Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it just, doesn't distort. It takes no end of abuse. It's like, you can pour water on the thing and it won't, it'll basically just, flip you off.
Yeah. We've had instances like that.
And they're pretty affordable these days. You can pick them up secondhand 416s pretty easily.
Yeah,
well,
not that expensive.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to bring up as we wrap up, because it's 6 o'clock and I want to wrap this up pretty soon. But just the whole philosophy of just getting out there and recording everything you can, and it's so much more affordable now than it's ever been. I mean, you can pick up a Zoom somewhere and a good microphone for just a few $100, right, and just start recording the world, because that's really what makes your work very distinctive and very, it makes it your own. You're creating your own palette, and that's one of the reasons I'm thrilled that you guys are my first guests, because that's really something I believe in. I mean, there's so many sound effects libraries out there that are readily available, and sure, we all use them. We always have a need for that kind of thing when we can't afford to go out there. But whenever you can, and just start recording the world, that's you guys concur with that. Any thoughts you have on that philosophy?
Well, I since I do editorial, as much, actually I do more editorial than sound recording. I would say you can make it happen in front of the microphone faster than you can cut it in most cases. So, if you have something that, especially as like a repetitive task, it's like Foley, if you're doing, a cloth track, it's easier for you to do a less than perfect cloth track that'll actually work better than something that you labor cutting from a library. Big stuff obviously is different. It's like, a car recording, there's only one Matt's Bronco, there's, it's like, that sort of stuff. It makes sense to, obviously, do more properly. But I think to what you said, Steve, it's like the thing that's most valuable about it is that you actually start really listening a lot more critically.
Sure.
I think to the microphone and what, the space is giving you, as opposed to, just like, auditioning a pre-made sound effect where you go, oh yeah, that sounds good, or that sounds bad, or that sounds great, or whatever. It's like when you have the actual recorder running, it's like, yeah, I can actually do adjustments that would be impossible otherwise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that? Same?
Yeah, well, I particularly adore going somewhere with the microphones, putting the headphones on, and it's just like this. It's almost like some kind of VR. If you've got this apparatus and everything is just very heightened, and you become really sensitized to what might seem rather ordinary otherwise if you were just there without your mics. And so I do love to just go out and explore. I can show you real quick I set up a couple things in case anyone was just curious about gear or anything, but I have a couple of recorders in bags, and they're always ready to go. This one I use a lot for surround ambiances. I'll go out and just here's it's a 5.1 microphone.
Wow.
DPA 5100. So it has like a left. You can see like inside this thing is like a left, a right, a center, and then there's two surrounds in the back.
Oh, that's neat.
And this thing is so convenient. It has this little thread. You can put it on a short pole, and it almost doesn't look like a microphone or something.
Sure.
So you can just sort of like go into places. I'll roll into neighborhoods and pop this up through my sunroof, and you could hardly tell.
Do a real stealthy kind of
recording. It just looks kind of funny or something.
That's very good.
Not even noticed.
So you're all ready to go if you hear something in the neighborhood, or you're going on a trip, or you just have that ready to go in your car. And the little Zoom recorders are so cheap.
Oh yeah. I can really geek out. I'll really go the extra mile.
The big
And
rigs,
here's
yeah.
like, you know, mid-side sheps where you can get the solid center, you get the side, there's a rear-facing mid.
Mhm.
So on this one with like 3 channels, I could derive a surround,
Right.
That's
or
very cool.
any sort of combination I want. And then
Mhm.
with this fun little camera tripod,
Yeah.
I also have on here, I'll pull this off, you can see that off. There's like 2 ORTF sheps
Mhm.
on the back. And so I can adjust this, tweak the angle, because sometimes in a surround, maybe you want to try to get a surround picture, but maybe there's a generator or somebody's car is idling over there.
Right.
And, you know, with this one piece, single point, you know, very convenient thing, you're kind of stuck with where the mics are going. But these, you know, with the clamps and
You can aim
adjustment
them.
things,
You
yeah,
can
we
aim
can
them,
tweak it. And maybe I'm cheating a little bit. I'm not really getting a perfect 5.0 surround image, but I'm getting the angles that I want. And then, you know, in sound design, we can work with the spread and change things.
We
So
can tweak it a
when
little.
I'm out on my own, I do sort of geek out in this kind of way.
I like
you know.
it.
And
I
then
like
I'll
it.
take omnis and I'll add omnis and spread them out really wide and far directions in case there's something fun happening out there. And
Gotcha.
but those are, I'll do those things whether or not somebody asks me to.
Yeah, you just
Right.
got them ready.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's always smart, just to be ready for any situation and have them out there. Gentlemen,
And a lot of
thank you.
times, just take the stereo left and right and be happy with it. But
Which is
I
what
have
we did for many,
along-
many years. It was
Yeah.
mono or stereo for the longest time. Guys, thank you so much. This has been
Thank you.
really fun. I hope our attendees have enjoyed this, and this will be archived in our collection for others to enjoy. It's a good record of this this wisdom you're imparting on all of us. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Whoops.
There.
Eric's camera just went rogue again. Thank you, Eric. Say goodbye, Eric. Say goodbye,
I'm still
Eric.
alive. The phone will
Okay.
survive. My phone will go on.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you to all our attendees. Thank you for supporting the Hollywood Sound Museum. We've got Mark Mangini coming up. We've got Allison D. Moore, a renowned Foley walker. We've got so many great things. I'm glad you're here to share it all with us. Thank you very much. Good night,
Take care.
everybody, and keep listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.